Chapter 8. I opened Alicia's file on my desk. Diomedes had volunteered it. You must read my notes, they will help you. I had no desire to wade through his notes. I already knew what Diomedes thought. I need to find out what I thought. But nonetheless, I accepted it politely. Thank you, that would be such a help. My office was small and sparsely furnished, tucked away at the back of the building by the fire escape. I looked out the window. A little black bird was pecking at a patch of frozen grass on the ground outside, dispiritedly and without much hope. I shivered. The room was freezing. The small radiator under the window was broken. Yuri said he'll try to get it fixed, but that was my best bet, was to talk to Stephanie or, failing that, bring it up in community. I felt a slight pang of empathy with Edith and her battle to get the broken pool cue replaced. I looked through Alicia's file without much expectation. The majority of the information I needed was in the online database. Diomedes, however, like a lot of older staff members, preferred to write his reports by hand, and ignoring Stephanie's nagging request to the contrary, continued to do so, hence the dog-ear file in front of me. I flicked through Diomedes' notes, ignoring his somewhat old-fashioned psychoanalytic interpretation, and focused on the nurse's handover reports of Alicia's day-to-day behavior. I read through those reports carefully. I wanted facts, figures, details. I needed to know exactly what I was getting into, what I to deal with, and if any surprises were in store. The file revealed little. When she was first admitted, Alicia slashed her wrists twice and self-harmed with whatever she could get her hands on. She was kept on 2-on-1 observation for the first 6 months, meaning 2 nurses watched over her at all times, which was eventually relaxed to 1-on-1. Alicia made no effort to interact with patients or staff, remaining withdrawn and isolated, and for the most part, the other patients had left her alone. If people don't reply when you speak to them and never initiate conversation, you soon forget they're there. Alicia had quickly melted into the background, becoming invisible. Only one incident stood out. It took place in the canteen, a few weeks after Alicia's admission. Ilef accused Alicia of taking her seat. What exactly had happened was unclear, but the confrontation escalated rapidly. Apparently, Alicia became violent. She smashed a plate and tried to slash Elif's throat with a jagged edge. Alicia had to be restrained, sedated, and placed in isolation. I wasn't sure why this incident drew my attention, but it didn't feel right to me. I decided to approach Elif and ask her about it. I tore off a sheet of paper from a pad and reached for my pen. An old habit formed at university, something about putting pen to paper, helps me organize my mind. I've always had difficulty formulating an opinion until I'd written it down. I began scribbling ideas, notes, goals, devising a plan of attack. To help Alicia, I needed to understand her and her relationship with Gabriel. Did she love him? Hate him? Why has she refused to speak about the murder? Or anything else? No answers, not yet, just questions. I wrote down a word and underlined it, Alicitis. The self-portrait. It was important. Somehow I knew that, and understanding why would be the central to unlocking this mystery. This painting was Alicia's sole communication, her only testimony. It was saying something I had yet to comprehend. I made a note to revisit the gallery to look at the painting again. I wrote down another word, childhood. If I was to make sense of Gabriel's murder, I needed to understand not only the events of the night Alicia killed him, but also the events of the distant past. The seeds of what happened in those few minutes when she shot her husband were probably sown years earlier. Murderous rage, homicidal rage, is not born in the present. It originates in the land before memory, in the world of early childhood, with abuse and mistreatment, which builds up a charge over the years until it explodes, often at the wrong target. I need to find out how her childhood has shaped her, and if Alicia couldn't or wouldn't tell me, I had to find someone who would. Someone who knew Alicia before the murder, who could help me understand her history, who she was and how she ended up this way. In the file, Alicia's next of kin was listed as her aunt, Linda Rose, who brought her up following the death of Alicia's mother in a car accident. Alicia had also been in a car crash but survived. That trauma must have affected the little girl profoundly. I hope Linda would be able to tell me about it. The only other contact was Alicia's lawyer, Max Berenson. Max was Gabriel Berenson's brother. He was perfectly placed to observe their marriage intimately. Whether Max Berenson would confide in me was another matter. An unsolicited approach to Alicia's family by her psychotherapist was unorthodox, to say the least. I had a dim feeling Diomedes would not approve. Better not ask his permission, I decided, in case he refused. As I look back, this was my first professional transgression in dealing with Alicia, setting an unfortunate precedent for what followed. I should have stopped there, but even then it was too late to stop. In many ways, my fate was already decided, like in a Greek tragedy. I reached for the phone. I called Max Berenson at his office. Using the contact number listed in Alicia's file, it rang several times before it was answered. The offices of Elliot Barrow and Berenson, said a receptionist with a bad cold. Mr. Berenson, please. May I ask who is calling? My name is Theo Faber. I'm a psychotherapist at the Grove. I was wondering if it might be possible to have a word with Mr. Berenson about his sister-in-law. There was a slight pause before she responded. Oh, I see. Well, Mr. Berenson is out of the office for the rest of the week. He's in Edinburgh visiting a client. If you leave your number, I'll have him call you on his return. I gave her my number and hung up. I dialed the next number in the file, Alicia's aunt, Linda Rose. It was answered on the first ring. An elderly woman's voice sounded breathless and rather annoyed. Yes? What is it? Is that Miss Rose? Who are you? I'm calling regarding your niece, Alicia Berenson. I'm a psychotherapist working at the... Fuck off, she hung up. I frowned to myself. Not a good start. Chapter 9. I desperately needed a cigarette. As I left the Grove, I looked for them in my coat pockets, but they weren't there. Looking for something? I turned around. Yuri was standing right behind me. I hadn't heard him, and I was a little startled by him so close. I found them in the nurse's station, he grinned, handing me my pack of cigarettes. Must have fallen out of your pocket. Thanks. I took them and lit one. I offered him the packet. Yuri shook his head. I don't smoke. Not cigarettes, anyway. He laughed. You look like you need a drink. Come on, I'll buy you a pit. I hesitated. My instinct was to refuse. I have never been one for socializing with work colleagues, and I doubted Yuri and I had much in common. But he probably knew Alicia better than anyone else at the Grove, and his insight might prove useful. Sure, I said. Why not? We went to the pub near the station, the Slaughter Lamp, dark and dingy. It had seen better days, so had the old man dozing over their half-finished pints. Yuri got us a couple of beers, and we sat at a table at the back. Yuri took a long swig of beer and wiped his mouth. Well, tell me about Alicia. Alicia? How did you find her? I'm not sure I did find her. Yuri gave me a quizzical look, then smiled. She doesn't want to be found? Yeah, it's true. She's hiding. You're close to her. I can see that. I take special care of her. No one knows her like I do, not even Professor Diomedes. His voice had a boastful note. It annoyed me for some reason. I wondered how well he really knew her or if he was just bragging. What do you make of her silence? What do you think it means? Yuri shrugged. I guess it means she's not ready to talk. She'll talk when she's ready. Ready for what? Ready for the truth, my friend. And what is that? Yuri cocked his head to one side slightly, studying me. The question that came out of his mouth surprised me. Are you married, Theo? I nodded. I am, yes. Yeah, I thought so. I was married once, too. We moved here from Latvia, but she didn't fit in like I did. She didn't make an effort, and she didn't learn English. Anyway, I wasn't happy. But I was in denial, lying to myself. He drained his drink and completed his sentence. Until I fell in love. Presumably, you didn't mean with your wife? Yuri laughed and shook his head. No, a woman who lived near me, a very beautiful woman. It was love at first sight. I saw her on the street. It took me a long time to get the courage to talk to her, and I used to follow her. I watched her sometimes, without her knowing. I'll stand outside her house and look, hoping she would appear at the window. He laughed. The story was starting to make me feel uncomfortable. I finished my beer and glanced at my watch, hoping Yuri would take the hint, but he didn't. One day I tried speaking to her, but she wasn't interested in me. I tried a few times, but she told me to stop pestering her. I didn't blame her, though. I was about to make my excuses, but Yuri kept talking. It was very hard to accept. I was sure we were meant to be together. She broke my heart. I got very angry with her, very mad. And what happened? I was curious despite myself. Nothing. Nothing? You stayed with your wife? Ray shook his head. No, it was over with her, but it took falling for this woman for me to admit it, to face the truth about me and my wife. Sometimes it takes courage, and a long time to be honest. I see, and you think Alicia's not ready to face the truth about her marriage? Is that what you're saying? You may well be right. Ray shrugged, and now I'm engaged to a nice girl from Hungary. She works in a spa. She speaks good English, and we're a good match. We have a good time. I nodded and checked my watch again. I picked up my coat. I have to go. I'm late to meet my wife. Okay, no problem. What's her name? Your wife? For some reason, I didn't want to tell him. I didn't want Yuri to know anything about her, but that was stupid. Catherine. Her name is Catherine, but I call her Kathy. Yuri gave me an odd smile. Let me give you some advice. Go home to your wife. Go home to Kathy, who loves you, and leave Alicia behind. Chapter 10. I went to meet Kathy at the National Theatre Cafe on the South Bank, where the performers would often congregate after rehearsal. She was sitting at the back of the cafe with a couple of fellow actresses, deep in conversation. She looked up at me as I approached. Are your ears burning, darling? Kathy said as she kissed me. Should they be? I'm telling the girls all about you. Should I leave? Don't be silly. Sit down. It's perfect timing. I just got to how we met. I sat down and Kathy continued her story. It was a story she enjoyed telling. She occasionally glanced in my direction and smiled as if to include me, but the gesture was proportionary, for this was her tale, not mine. I was sitting at a bar when he finally showed up. At last, when I'd given up hope of ever finding him, in he walked, the man of my dreams. Better late than ever. I thought I was going to be married by the time I was 25, By 30, I'm going to have 2 kids, small dog, big mortgage. But here I was, 33-ish, and things hadn't quite gone to plan. Kathy said this with an arch smile and winked at the girls. Anyway, I was seeing this Australian guy called Daniel, but he didn't want to get married or have kids anytime soon. So I knew I was wasting my time. And we were out one night when suddenly it happened. Mr. Wright walked in. Kathy looked at me and smiled and rolled her eyes. With his girlfriend. This part of the story needed careful handling to retain her audience sympathy. Kathy and I were both dating other people when we met. Double infidelity isn't the most attractive or auspicious start to a relationship, particularly as we were introduced to each other by our then partners. They knew each other for some reason. I can't remember the precise details. Mary Ann had once gone out with Daniel's flatmate, possibly, or the other way around. I don't remember exactly how we were introduced, but I do remember the first moment I saw Kathy. It was like an electric shock. I remember her long black hair, piercing green eyes, her mouth. She was beautiful, extinguished, an angel. At this point in telling the tale, Kathy paused and smiled and reached for my hand. Remember, Theo, how we got talking? You said you were training to be a shrink. I said I was nuts, so it was a match made in heaven. This got a big laugh from the girls. Kathy laughed too and glanced at me sincerely, anxiously, her eyes searching mine. No, but, darling, seriously, it was love at first sight, wasn't it? This was my cue. I nodded and kissed her cheek. Of course it was. True love. This received a look of approval from her friends. But I wasn't performing. She was right. It was love at first sight. Well, lust anyway. Even though I was with Mary Ann that night, I couldn't keep my eyes off Kathy. I watched her from a distance, talking animatedly to Daniel, and then I saw her lips melt. Fuck you. They were arguing. It looked heated. Daniel turned and walked out. You're being quiet, Mary Ann said. What's wrong? Nothing. Let's go home then. I'm tired. Not yet. I was only half listening. Let's have another drink. I want to go now. Then go. Mary Ann shot me a hurt look, then grabbed her jacket and walked out. I knew there would be a row the next day, but I didn't care. I made my way over to Kathy at the bar. Is Daniel coming back? No. How about Mary Ann? I shook my head. No. Would you like another drink? Yes, I would. So we ordered 2 more drinks. We stood at the bar talking. We discussed my psychotherapy training, I remember, and Kathy told me about her stint at drama school. She didn't stay long as she signed up with an agent at the end of her first year and had been acting professionally ever since. I imagine, without knowing why, that she was probably rather a good actress. Studying wasn't for me, she said. I wanted to get out there and do it, you know. Do what? Act? No, live. Kathy tilted her head, looking out from under her dark lashes, her emerald green eyes peering at me mischievously. So, Theo, how do you have the patience to keep doing it? Studying, I mean. Maybe I don't want to get out there and live. Maybe I'm a coward. No, if you were a coward, you have gone home with your girlfriend, Kathy laughed, a surprisingly wicked laugh. I wanted to grab her and kiss her hand. I've never experienced such overwhelmingly physical desire before. I wanted to pull her close, feel her lips and the heat of her body against mine. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have said that. I always say whatever pops into my head. I told you I'm a bit nuts. Kathy did that a lot, protesting her insanity. I'm crazy. I'm nuts. I'm insane. I never believed her. She laughed too easily and too often for me to believe she ever suffered the kind of darkness I'd had experienced. She had spontaneity, a lightness she took a delight in living and was endlessly amused by life. Despite her protestation, she seemed the least crazy person I ever known. Around her, I felt more sane. Kathy was American. She was born and brought up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Her English mother gave Kathy dual citizenship, but Kathy didn't seem even remotely English. She was determinedly, distinguishedly un-English, not just in the way she spoke, but in the way she saw the world and how she approached it. Such confidence, such exuberance. I've never met anyone like her. We left the bar, hauled a cab. I gave the address of my flat. We rode the short journey in silence. When we arrived, she silently pressed her lips to mine. I broke through my reserve and pulled her toward me. We kept kissing as I fumbled with the key to the front door. We were scarcely inside before we were undressing, stumbling into the bedroom, falling onto the bed. That night was the most erotic, blissful night of my life. I spent hours exploring Kathy's body. We made love all night until dawn. I remember so much white everywhere, white sunlight creeping around the edges of the curtains, white walls, white bed sheets, the whites of her eyes, her teeth, her skin. Never known that skin could be so luminous, so translucent, ivory white with occasional blue veins visible just beneath the surface, like threads of colors in white marble. She was a statue, a Greek goddess come to life in my hands. We lay there wrapped in each other's arms. Kathy was facing me, her eyes so close they were out of focus. I gazed into a hazy green sea. Well, she said. Well, what about Mary Ann? Mary Ann? A flicker of a smile. Your girlfriend. Oh, yes. I hesitated, unsure. I don't know about Mary Ann. And Daniel? Kathy rolled her eyes. Forget Daniel. I have. Have you really? Kathy responded by kissing me. Before Kathy left, she took a shower. While she was showering, I phoned Mary Ann. I wanted to arrange to see her, to tell her face to face, but she was annoyed about the previous night and insisted we have it out then and there, on the phone. Mary Ann wasn't expecting me to break up with her, but that's what I did. As gently as I could, she started crying and became upset and angry. I hung up on her. Brutal, yes, and unkind. I'm not proud of that phone call, but it seems like the only honest action to take. I still don't know what I could have done differently. On our first proper date, Kathy and I met at Key Gardens. It was her idea. She was astonished I'd never been. You're kidding. You've never gone to the greenhouses? There's this big one with all the tropical orchids, and they keep it so hot it's like an oven. When I was at Drama school. I used to go and hang out there just to warm up. How about we meet there after you finish work? Then she hesitated, certainly unsure. Or is it too far for you to go? I'll go further than Kew Gardens for you, darling. Idiot, she kissed me. Kathy was waiting at the entrance when I arrived, in her enormous coat and scarf, waving like an excited child. Come on, follow me. She led me through the frozen mud to the big glass structure that housed the tropical plants and pushed open the door and charged inside. I followed her and was immediately struck by the sudden rise in temperature, an onslaught of heat. I tore off my scarf and coat. Kathy smiled. See, I told you, it's like a sauna. Ain't it great? We walked around along the paths, carrying our coats, holding hands, looking at the exotic flowers. I felt an unfamiliar happiness just being in her company, as though a secret door had been opened and Kathy had beckoned me across the threshold into a magical world of warmth and lights and color, and hundreds of orchids in a dazzling confetti of blues and reds and yellows. I could feel myself thawing in the heat, softening around the edges like a tortoise emerging into the sun after a long winter's sleep, blinking and waking up. Kathy did that for me. She was my invitation to life, one I grasped with both hands. So this is it, I remember thinking. This is love. I recognized it without question and knew clearly that I've never experienced anything like this before. My previous romantic encounters had been brief, unsatisfactory for all concerned. As a student, I had summoned up the nerve, aided by a considerable amount of alcohol, to lose my virginity to a Canadian sociology student called Meredith, who wore sharp metal braces that cut into my lips as we kissed. A string of unexpired relationships followed. I never seemed to find that special connection I longed for. I believe I was too damaged, too incapable of intimacy. But now every time I heard Kathy's contagious smile, giggle, a wave of excitement ran through me. Through a kind of osmosis, I absorbed her youthful exuberance, her self-consciousness and joy. I said yes to her every suggestion and every whim. I didn't recognize myself. I liked this new person, this unafraid man Kathy inspired me to be. We fucked all the time. I was consumed with lust, perpetually, urgently hungry for her. I needed to keep touching her. I couldn't get close enough. Kathy moved in with me that December, into my one-bedroom apartment in Kentish Town. The thickly carpeted basement flat had windows but no view. Our first Christmas together, we were determined to do it properly. We brought a tree from the stall by the tube station, dressed it with a jumble of decorations and light from the market. I remember vividly the scent of pine needles and wood and candles burning, and Kathy's eyes staring into mine, sparkling, twinkling like the lights on the tree. I spoke without thinking. The words just came out. Will you marry me? Kathy stared at me. What? I love you, Kathy. Will you marry me? Kathy laughed. Then to my joy and amazement, she said yes. The next day we went out and she chose a ring, and the reality of the situation dawned on me. We were engaged. Bizarrely, the first people I thought of were my parents. I wanted to introduce Kathy to them. I wanted them to see how happy I was, that I finally escaped, that I was free. So we got to the train to Surrey. In hindsight, it was a bad idea, doomed from the start. My father greeted me with typical hostility. You look terrible, Theo. You're too thin. Your hair is too short. You look like a convict. Thanks, Dad. Good to see you too. My mother seemed more depressed than usual, quieter, smaller, somehow as if she weren't there. That was a heavier presence, unfriendly, glaring, and unsmiling. He didn't take his cold, dark eyes off Kathy the entire time. It was an uncomfortable lunch. They didn't seem to like her, nor did they seem particularly happy for us. I don't know why I was surprised. After lunch, my father disappeared into his study. He didn't emerge again. When my mother said goodbye, she held on to me for too long, too closely, and was unsteady on her feet. I felt desperately sad. When Kathy and I left the house, part of me hadn't left. I knew, but had remained behind, forever a child, trapped. I felt lost, hopeless, close to tears. Then Kathy surprised me, as always. She threw her arms around me, pulling me into a hug. I understand now, she whispered in my ear. I understand it all. I love you so much more now. She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. We were married in April in a small registry office off Unston Square. No parents invited, and no God. Nothing religious at Kathy's insistence, but I said a secret prayer during the ceremony. I silently thanked him for giving me such unexpected, undesired happiness. I saw things clearly now. I understood his greatest purpose. God had abandoned me during my childhood when I had felt so alone and so scared. He had been keeping Kathy hidden up his sleeve, waiting to produce her like a deaf magician. I felt such humility and gratitude for every second we spent together. I was aware how lucky, how incredibly fortunate I was to have such love, how rare I was, and how others weren't so lucky. Most of my patients weren't loved. Alicia Berenson wasn't. It's hard to imagine two women more different than Kathy and Alicia. Kathy makes me think of light, warmth, color, and laughter. When I think of Alicia, I think only of depth, of darkness, of sadness, of silence.